I myself will present today's webinar, and we prepared all the slides together with my colleague from Italy, Luca Galli. Also, Peter Opai and Anton Thielen is here for your advanced questions. So let's get it started. Today's objective is to understand system design basics and learn important points to consider during a PRAESENSA offer preparation. I know sometimes sales and project teams needs some support to fully understand a new product portfolio. Sometimes it might be hard during busy days. You learn something new, so we really hope that this presentation helps to you to prepare offers faster than before. And today's agenda, we will shortly talk about the main components and the basics of design. Secondly, we will go through the points to consider to prepare an offer, the most important points to remember during an offer preparation. And finally, we will show a small project example that you can see daily with PRAESENSA. Let's go through the main components. You will also remember from the first presentation, the commercial one, we went through the products. And here is a reminder for that before we start. We, of course, have a controller, a PRAESENSA controller. It's the traffic cop of the system, knows everything about the system, manages the audio routing, just like we have in our other systems like Presidio. We also have a controller here. We have two types of amplifiers, 8-channel and 4-channel. Both are 600 watt, as you will remember. We have a multifunctional power supply. We will also go into the details because this device has a lot of different functions than being a power supply. And we have two types of call stations, the desktop and the wall mount version. These are the main system components. We also have accessories. We will not go into the details in that presentation. But before we go into the connections and the system design basics and then offer preparation details, I really would like to show you the rear side of the devices. I think it will make things much clearer during our discussions. Here you see the system controller. PRAESEL stands for System Controller Large. This device is able to manage more than 100 Dante channels. And as you see in the picture, we have 5 network ports with no PoE output in this device. Here is the VGO symbols. We have VGO symbols for each and every component of PRAESENSA system. You can find these drawings on PRAESENSA micro website, where you will find the link in the last slide of this presentation. And as you see, this is the front side of the device. We have an SD card on the device. It can go up to 32 gigabytes. And on the left-hand side, here I will show my mouse. Here you see 24 volts power inputs. Going into the amplifiers, here we have 2 times network ports, no PoE output here, and it depends, of course, if you're using 8-channel or 4-channel amplifiers, then we have 8 or 4 loudspeaker outputs here. And then we have a dual 48-volt power connection for each device. Plus here we have something called Lifeline. You will also remember this. It's a connection in between multifunctional power supply and amplifiers. It's an analog audio line. In case the Omnio interface fails or the Ethernet network is lost, this connection will take over and will make you able to send your announcements and your messages across. This is the VGO symbols for the amplifiers, and this is the front side. When we come to MPS3 unit, as you see, we again have 5 network ports, but this time we also have two PoE ports. The first one and the second one is always PoE. And we have one SFP slot on the device. So you can directly connect your fiber connection to the MPS unit without having nothing in between. But one thing you should consider here is, as you see, there's only one port. So if you would like to have a redundant connection, you have to consider that you have another SFP port somewhere in the system. It can be another MPS3 unit or any other thing. So make sure that you are satisfying a loop there if you need it. Here in this device, yes, it's a switch like we show with the yellow mark here. But it's also a power supply for 3 amplifiers. You see here, this is for the first amplifier, second amplifier, and third amplifier. Powers up 3 amplifiers. That's the reason why we call it MPS3 actually. And then it's already also a power supply for system controller. So sends a 24-volt dual connection to system controller. And as you see here, it's also a battery charger. That's the reason actually why we call it multifunctional. So it's not only a power supply, but also a lot of different functions. And last but not least, you see control inputs and outputs right here. Visual symbols again, and the front panel. Call stations is of course one of the major components of PRAESENSA. We also have 2 RJ45 connections, the Omnio ports in the call station. And then we also have, you will see here in the picture, a 3.5 millimeter stereo mini jack input on the call station. Again, the visual symbols are available. And when you connect all main components to each other, the very basic PRAESENSA system looks like this. So this is the network connection part. Starting from amplifiers, goes to MPS unit, and then from MPS unit it comes back to controller. So we have a loop there, as you see. And in this example, we were using 2 call stations, so they are both connected with PoE to the MPS unit. That could be one call station connected redundantly. Also, that's also possible. It depends to your scenario, but this is how it looks in a very short. This is the power side. As you see, the yellow cables, the light yellow, is carrying 24 volts from MPS unit to the controller. The orange cable carries 48 volt from MPS unit to the amplifiers and feeding 3 amplifiers here. And battery is also connected to the battery charger part of MPS unit. Of course, it's not mandatory. If you need it, if you are setting up an EM54 system, then maybe you want to use batteries. Otherwise, it's not mandatory. MPS3 can also work without batteries. If you are doing a rack with PRAESENSA, this is how it will look like. So the controller and an amplifier comes. Here we have 3 amplifiers, as you see. That means we have to have at least 3 MPS units. And we always advise you to install MPS3 units, lower part of the cabinet. And then finally, the batteries connected to MPS units, 1 for each. Please remember that PRAESENSA can work centralized, like we see in the example right now, or decentralized. And also remember that if you are going for the decentralized solution, you don't need to put controller for each and every section, because now all the devices are IP, and now it differentiates, for example, from Presidio or traditional PA one-to-one PA systems in the market. So then you save a lot of controllers there. Please remember that. By saying that, let's go to the points to consider for offer preparation. Maybe you would expect me to start from the controller, but actually I will start from the amplifier quantity. because amplifier quantity is very important and can trigger a lot of different parameters during the offer preparation. And of course, to understand amplifier quantity and to calculate it, the first thing we have to know is how many loudspeaker zones do you need? And of course, what are the power requirements for each zone? One thing here again differentiates PRAESENSA. As you will remember from the first presentation, again, we are using effective power utilization. So PRAESENSA is able to use a very smart power sharing function that you don't have to care about each and every loudspeaker zone and what kind of amplifier channel you're using for that particular zone. As you will remember, in the direct topology systems, in the traditional ones, generally we write down all the loudspeaker zones and then we will try to find out the right amplifier channel for each zone. And then we will multiply or sum up how many amplifier channels and how many types we're using, and then we will come up with a decision how many amplifiers we have to use. Here in PRAESENSA, it's much more flexible. As there's a smart power sharing, you don't have to take care individually the loudspeaker zones. The only thing you have to make sure is that total power per amplifier is below or is equal to 600 watts. It doesn't matter if it's an 8-channel amplifier or 4-channel amplifier, both supports 600 watts, but it's just a matter of choice. So you have to choose which one makes more sense to use 8-channel or 4-channel amplifier, depending to your scenario, locations, or number of loudspeaker zones. So that's the first thing you have to decide, the power per zone. You have to check the total power per amplifier, and then you have to decide which type of amplifier you are using. After this, you have to make sure overall system requirements, the required power is less than the total power amplifier for sure. That's a general rule, right? So after you decide your amplifier channels, it's always good to check that you are good with total amplifier power also. Always remember that you have an internal 600 watts per amplifier channel inside the amplifier now. If you are using an 8-channel amplifier, there's always a 9-channel inside. If you're using a 4, there's always a 5th channel inside that will support you as a spare amplifier. So you don't need to add additional hardware, additional amplifiers to your offer just to satisfy spare amplifier part. So as you see, in the first time we were talking more commercially, more theoretically. Now these are the real examples how these functions is affecting our lives and cost of ownership for the system. For details about amplifiers, please always remember to complete PRAESENSA expert and master level trainings. Here is an example about amplifier selection. Let's assume that we have 5 zones of 60 watts, 3 zones of 90 watt, 3 zones of 120 watt, and maybe a zone of 200 watt where, for example, you can use hemidirectional loudspeakers or those kind of things. I think very possible scenario in our daily lives. We can easily see such example. So here, of course, it makes sense to use one 8-channel and one 4-channel because we don't have any problems with the power here. And we have to have 12 zones in total. So an 8-channel and 4-channel fits perfectly. So if you can draw it quickly on a piece of paper, so 60 watts here, 90 watts here. So the first amplifier will be 540 watts required and can do 600 watts, so no problem here. And then the 4-channel amplifier will be loaded like this. So it will be in total 560 watts. After you figure out how many amplifiers and what kind of amplifiers you want to use, the second question is to figure out how many MPS3 units you have to have. The critical question here, the most important one, is of course how many amplifiers you have, because the MPS3 unit can feed up to 3 amplifiers. So that's the first question. Secondly, do you have any scenarios to create by using control inputs and outputs? opening a garage door, triggering something in any other system, or something like that. Any scenarios defined by end user. So make sure that you have enough input and outputs for that, because one MPS3 unit contains 8 supervised control inputs and 8 control outputs. So if you need more than that, maybe you should consider some other options or adding another MPS unit. Thirdly, how many call stations you will connect to this particular MPS3 unit, or overall to your system. Both you should consider. An MPS3 unit has 2 network ports with 1 GB with PoE. So if you want to feed your call stations via that connection, and you always have to consider if they will be redundant connections or just regular connections, because if it is redundant, you will need 2 PoE ports per call station. So then with this calculation, you will figure out if you have enough MPS unit to feed all your call stations. Last but not least, always consider battery management, because one MPS3 unit can support up to maximum 230 ampere hour battery. If you need more than that, then probably you will go for a different solution. But this is something you should also consider when you're calculating your MPS3 quantity. So these 4 points is important to go through to decide how many MPS3 you will use. So now in our system, we have our amplifiers and our MPS units. Now it's time to calculate call station quantities and decide what types of call stations we will use. And the right questions to ask: first, how many locations do you have to send announcements from? This is a physical question, and of course you have to decide where the operators are sitting and what kind of rights they will have, what kind of call stations they will use, and from where you will collect announcements into the PAVA system. That's the first thing. Secondly, of course, what type of call stations? Is it a fireman's department? Will you use a wall mount panel, a customized call station, maybe, or is it just a information desk where you will only send business calls? So that these kind of informations will help you to decide if it will be desktop or wall mounted. And then how to power your call stations. Maybe your call stations is close to the center, maybe they are remote. As we asked the question in the MPS3 calculations, do you have enough PoE ports? And yeah, you should consider that. You should at least roughly have to consider and draw that before you prepare and give your offer. The question is, do you want to connect your emergency call station redundant? As said, if so, you will need 2 ports needed. And here, one thing will support you is the PRAESENSA switch, PRAESENSA ES8P2S. And that product is EN54 approved together with PRAESENSA devices. That can be an option for you to increase number of PoE outputs. Or is it possible to use an PoE injector or any other PoE source to power your call stations or your remote call stations? So you can also say that, yeah, I have a call station remote, I don't know, 2-3 kilometers away, and I don't need EN54 at that part of the system, maybe. So you can also consider to use a PoE midspan or any other PoE source, maybe, to feed that remote call station. Or you can consider to add another MPS3 unit if it's a EN54, fully EN54 system, maybe. Last but not least, about call stations, how many call station extension you need per call station that you have to add your offer. Please remember, A PRAESENSA call station always requires at least one extension. So don't forget to add your extension to your offer each and every time you add a call station to your system, at least one. And maximum number is 4. So like in this picture, the small picture you see on the right bottom, you can add 4 extensions per call station. And of course, the buttons are configurable, so you can create different scenarios, or you can just assign a button to a loudspeaker zone for the basic functions. Finally, a number of controller or controllers. Because, of course, in the system, you at least need one controller. It's mandatory. All systems have to have at least one controller. The question here, do you need redundancy for the controllers? If so, you can add second controller to your offer. And one controller will be defined as duty controller, main controller, you can also call, and the other one will be standby automatically in the system. If you need more controllers, later PRAESENSA system will support more than 2 controllers, so you can always follow developments with your local Bosch teams or your local MKR. And of course, this redundancy will give a good availability, system availability to your PRAESENSA system. Not to forget the end-of-line boards. Supervision is critical, important, and for EN54 applications is mandatory. One of the favorite asked questions when it comes to supervision side, coming from your side to us all the time, was about the pilotons. In PRAESENSA, it's different than the rest of the market. It's inaudible, discontinuous 25.5 kilohertz piloton. So none of your customers will be able to hear this frequency during the supervision. And I said it's discontinuous, so sometimes it comes and sometimes it goes. So it's not continuous, it's not always there, and that's another advantage, of course, about the piloton. By saying that, let's look into the end-of-line board. This is the smallest end-of-line board so far. I would say you see the picture on top. It's really small. And of course, PRAESENSA supports all the known connections about cabling, about loudspeaker cabling in the market today. So during your offer, you should also consider if you will use a regular loudspeaker cabling with one PRA AOL, end-of-line board, per loudspeaker zone. Or will you go for A and B cabling, where you can need 2 end-of-line boards per one channel? Or will you go for a Class A loop, which will not change your change number of end-of-line boards? It will be just like regular, because then you will also use 1 end-of-line board per loop. But yeah, that's something you should consider to figure out how many end-of-line boards you need. Next step, next question you should ask is the advanced control. This part is optional. Of course, we are satisfying all the voice alarm functions and all PA functions with the main components. And this part gives a big flexibility and a great user interface to PRAESENSA. It's completely optional, but has a lot of features for sure. So do you want to have an advanced public address software, meaning that you have to add a license APAL and a server APAS to your offer? As you see, server is a small computer here for operator, for clients. So not to mix up, I want to say this again, this is not a server that helps PRAESENSA to work or something. This is just for the advanced control side. This is just for the software or user interface side, this server, because sometimes question comes if PRAESENSA will not be able to work without the server or something. This is not related to that. PRAESENSA can work standalone. This server is just for the software part. Okay. And then the license will give you a very user-friendly, a very intuitive user interface that the end user or the operator of the system can manage live calls, text-to-speech, recorded messages, background music, can view history. So a part of logging. So of course, as a technical user, you can have a more detailed one, or you can use a logging viewer. And end user can schedule calls here. If you need this, you have to add a PRA-APAL and PRA-APAS to your offer. As said, optional. And then another favorite asked question, and then another thing to consider is, of course, the distances. If you are using a Cat6 cable, you are allowed to go 100 meters. And if you need more distances, then you can switch to a fiber connection and you can go up to 10 kilometers. If you want to reach a subcluster, a system component far away, it can be an MPS3 amplifier, call station, or anything. And if it is away more than 100 meters, then of course you can switch to fiber. With all this information in mind, of course, this is just for the main system components. Your offer can be richer by using some other accessories. There can be some different scenarios that maybe sometimes it will be hard to figure out. The system can be complicated. In these kind of situations, as you know, you can always contact Bosch, and we will try our best to help you with the system design. So you can always contact your local Bosch colleagues for these kind of applications. Let's go through a simple example, considering all the information we had so far. A very daily project we select here for you. It's not that complicated. It is something that you can easily see. Let's say we have a customer need 20 zones of 50 watts. 2 call stations will be used with 12 buttons, and they want to have 2 music sources. The solution here will be 3 amplifiers, because 3 8-channel amplifier can create 24 zones. So we are covering 20 zone request here. And then to feed that amplifiers, that 3 amplifiers, of course, we will need an MPS unit. 1 is enough because we have only 3 amplifiers here, and we don't have any other complicated scenario that will make us out of control inputs and outputs. We will use 2 call stations as requested. Here we choose the desktop ones apparently. And we remember to add extensions to our offers, because each and every call station requires at least 1 extension. Remember that. And then they have 2 music sources, and maybe it's better to have an audio input device, because some music sources cannot directly send Dante channels, right? Maybe they are analog audio, so we have to have a converter in between. So our system will look like this. As we talk, the controller, 3 amplifiers, and the MPS unit. MPS unit is giving power to controller and the amplifiers. Blue connections are the network connections. So as you see, each and every component are connected to each other. The main components are completely redundant there. Then we have taken another connection to analog to Dante converter. That device, you can see PRAESENSA data sheets. You will get a lot of advice about those devices there, and you can also always ask us what kind of devices we have tested so far. There's a lot of converters in the market, and the most known ones we are testing with PRAESENSA. And then 2 call stations is connected to the MPS unit with 1 connection, just regular wiring there. So this is how it will look like, a very simple, a very daily PRAESENSA system design, PRAESENSA offer. This is a useful link. I have also shared it before, but here I also add this micro website. Please visit PRAESENSA website. There's a lot of content you will find, all the drawings, all the data sheets, all the software you can download. As said, we will share the slides with you, so you will also have this link. Now, it's time for questions.